UNO Memories is made possible by Gary and Martha Solomon, 1979 graduates, and by the University of New Orleans Foundation, fostering academic excellence in a community that deserves it.
For centuries, lighthouses have guided coastal craft to safe harbor. Commanding a sweeping view of Lake Pontchartrain, another beacon has stayed true to its course. Sailing past the half-century mark, the University of New Orleans continues to chart new waters. This pioneering institution understood from its maiden voyage in 1958 that obstacles are challenges to be conquered. Inventiveness is its own reward, and her greatest treasure lies not in the bricks and mortar, but in the minds and stalwart spirit of her faculty, staff, and students.
I think that LSUNO and UNO opened up doors of opportunity for members of this community who otherwise would not have been able to get a college education.
The one thing that Homer had always talked about, and I think it's still true, the creation of a middle class, black and white middle class.
And this is a university that was about dreams when I came here, and it was exciting.
I mean, it was the hottest thing in town at the time.
You might as well say I was one of the pioneers because I went back there, when it just opened up.
Conferring over 66,000 degrees since its first graduation in 1962, today UNO celebrates 50 years of educational excellence. But this premier institution of higher learning has weathered many a stormy sea. By the mid-20th century, 1/3 of the state's population resided in Greater New Orleans, yet the metropolitan region remained without a public college or university. The first ripple of discontent surfaced in the community of Miro, downriver from New Orleans. Principal Joe Davies lobbied for equal opportunity for all students, without regard to socioeconomic status. Other voices of support weighed in. More widely known for his pinpoint weather forecasts, this respected meteorologist forecast a gloomy outlook for the city without a public university on the horizon. In the wake of a grassroots citizens movement, the YMBC, the Young Men's Business Club, came on board, with Rene Curry at the helm. The educational turf war pitted North Louisiana against South Louisiana, Baton Rouge versus New Orleans. In 1956, with the backing of then-Governor Earl Long, the Louisiana legislature passed Act 60, which called for the creation of a branch of Louisiana State University in New Orleans.
The idea from the beginning was that LSUNO, as it became known, of course, would not compete with Baton Rouge, with LSU. And in order to lower the possibility of that competition, we were always called a commuter college.
With hurdle number 1 cleared, hurdle number 2, lack of funding, generated some surprising site selections.
When the legislation was passed, the governor decided to veto the capital appropriation, so there wasn't any money at that time to build buildings, and the city of New Orleans was moving its municipal operations from the Gallier Hall area to the Civic Center, where it's located now. And a couple of the city officials hinted that if we were to buy or lease the buildings around Gallier Hall, that maybe they'd give us Gallier Hall too.
Governor Earl Long, however, honed in on some reclaimed waterfront property. In 1922, the New Orleans Levee Board began to fill in low-lying swamplands along the south shore of Lake Pontchartrain for flood control. Pontchartrain Beach Amusement Park opened there in 1939, but the advent of World War II altered the landscape. Hugging the shoreline were Camp Leroy Johnson, a POW site, a National Guard center, and test site for Higgins landing craft. WPA labor assisted in the construction of a U.S. Naval Reserve Air Training Base, complete with runways and barracks. The post-war years led the Navy to consolidate, moving all flight operations to Alvin Callender Field in Belchase.
And so the Navy abandonment of the site was a godsend to Earl Long, because he got a site that had buildings and he could tell the university to get started without any capital requirements.
When members of the Levee Board refused to go along, the governor replaced them. By unanimous vote on November 1st, 1957, The entire 195-acre site was leased to LSU for a commuter's college. The terms of the lease, 99 years, at $1 a year, extending through 2057. In 1957, Homer Hitt, an administrator at LSU, got the call to serve as head of the newly created school.
It was a perfect combination. He was sort of Southern good old boy in a way. I mean, he was from Texas. He had gone to LSU as a student, but he was absolute steel underneath. He was courtly, but he was also stubborn, persistent when he needed to be. He gets an enormous amount of the credit for its success.
He had an open door policy. I mean, you literally could walk into his office anytime. Can't even do that with deans.
Unaware of his future legacy, in July of 1946, John Altazan, Petty Officer, 2nd Class, received his discharge papers at the Naval Air Station on the shores of Lake Pontchartrain. 12 years later, he marched back in as one of the pioneering faculty of LSU-NO. On September 5, 1958, LSU-NO's inaugural convocation was held in a cavernous aircraft hangar.
You know, the birds were flying up in the eaves, the pigeons were dive bombing anybody in the middle, but purely that didn't bother anybody. Out in front of this podium were something like 1,000 students, all freshmen, remember. We had only freshmen in those days. Mayor Morrison got up and gave us a polite and gentlemanly welcome. And then Earl Long, who'd been kind of walking along across the back of this sort of boxing ring-sized podium, snapping his galluses and occasionally spitting over the back, took the microphone, indicated that he believed in education because his sister, bless her, was a teacher herself, and then took off on a 45-minute tirade against the Times-Picayune that hadn't supported him in the election. Meanwhile, all of these 1,000 students out there were shuffling their feet, were clapping their hands, were yelling, "Give him hell, Uncle, give him hell, Uncle Earl." And the 60 faculty, all scrubbed and looking well, their chins down to their knees, wondering what in the hell they'd gotten into.
These same faculty members were about to enter classrooms with a dynamic new to the South.
Even before the university opened in the spring of 1958, there was some talk that there was going to be a new branch of LSU in New Orleans, and there were black students, because all the students at my high school were black at that time, who were trying to get in. The decision had not yet been made that the school would be integrated.
And LSU policy at the time was not to allow African Americans to enroll. 10 or 11 black students sued in federal court to be admitted, and the courts agreed. So that right before UNO opened, the declaration came down from the federal courts that it would be open to everybody.
It was quite an experience for me to go to school with white students, and you know, there was still some of the vestiges of segregation and racism that was still around.
One of my clearest memories from that first semester is every time I drove in the morning, here was the same rather portly, phlegmatic black man with the stub of a cigar in his mouth, cheerfully painting out all of the graffiti that had been put on the building overnight, most of which were the equivalent of "nigger go home."
You'd go to the men's bathroom and somebody would write on the mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest one of all?" And then somebody would reply, "Snow White, you black MFs." And then somebody would reply underneath that, "Yo, mammy." And then there was another reply. They used to call LSU-NO Dillard by the Sea.
It was at that time then that Homer Hitt, I think, had his moment of greatest glory and utility for UNO, because he solved the problem without any help from his superiors. He got each of the subordinate, chairmen they were called then, and together they composed a statement concerning the fact that every student who started any kind of trouble, whatever, was automatically and at that moment dismissed from the university and need not reapply.
Most people, the staff was already at that time, was at least correct. The faculty, for the most part, was friendly, and many of them were actually helpful.
Early discrimination practices sometimes extended beyond the classroom.
One of the things that was a sore spot that first year was the cafeteria was operated by Morrison's. It was not open to blacks. we'd go in and they would not serve us. And we weren't very happy about that.
Morrison's was in charge, and they've always had a pretty good line of plain Southern cooking. However, they had another plain Southern attitude, which is they wouldn't serve black people.
That summer, the NAACP reorganized its youth chapter here in New Orleans, and I was invited to attend, and it was at A.P. Turo's office. And of course, it turned out that half the people there were UNO students. We asked Turo to go back into court and get the court to order the school to desegregate the cafeteria. Well, he was not that impressed. He didn't find that to be a big problem, because you say, well, you're there, you got to get an education. We say you still ought to go back. So he did. So they told Morrison, either you desegregate or you have to give up your lease. And then the university began to operate its own food services.
The strange thing about going to UNO is we went on the heels of integration, but when we got to the actual campus, there was segregation by choice, because it was like birds of a feather flocked together. All the black students went in one area, the cafeteria, and all the white students went in one area. And sometimes you see it slowly starting to integrate.
The campus itself still resembled a military base. When asked to make a comparison between LSUNO's makeshift classrooms and those of other colleges, another former student put his own naturally gnawing spin on it.
It was like night and day. I mean, it was apples and gorillas. Because you had classes in these old Navy barracks. I reiterate the word old Navy barracks, because summertime was scorching and hot, and you're sitting there trying to learn algebra and calculus and whatever.
The buildings were uncomfortable, though, and that's was the worst part in many ways. Had they been practical, for example, had it been possible to air condition them, but we actually had nothing but these huge, they were called reed fans, I recall. They sent this tremendous blast of hot air through the rooms, and little else was achieved except the fact that people couldn't keep a piece of paper on their desks.
Every one of those barracks had at least an inch crack between the sideboards, because they were barracks. Stripped all the bunks out of them, put a couple of desks in there, and that was your classroom. Science has been building N47, you know, and there you sat.
We used one of these old buildings that was over closer to Elysian Fields. It had originally housed pharmacy, among other things. So at least it had one lab with a lab bench and a sink and so forth. The rest of them, again, were strictly rooms that we adapted in one fashion or another. Somebody from the outside would bring in a lot of 2x4s and sawing tools, nailing tools, and we took down all the doors from parts of the building that weren't in use. These were our lab tables. As for drains, these were by and large the oil change type large funnels, which went through a hole in the floor. And you simply poured things in the top and it went right on outside, and that was the way you cheerfully disposed of things. I'm sure the EPA would never have allowed us to do that at the present time.
While the faculty struggled with the facilities, the commuter students on a budget wrestled with transportation issues.
Because we got off the bus and we took the down on the road bus or whatever, and you get there in the morning.
The summer after I graduated from West Jefferson, I saved my money and I bought a Volkswagen, a 1958 Volkswagen with the ragtop sunroof, and I used that car every day to come here to UNO. It took about an hour to get from my home in West Wego, where my parents still live. A lot of people carpooled with me. I'd pick them up and they'd pay me $2 a week for gas.
The makeshift campus occasionally confused students on the ground, but proved downright mystifying to the lost souls circling above.
I don't know if the story about airplanes actually landing on the campus after it had begun as a school are apocryphal or not. The one that I heard the most had to do with a man who was in radio contact with Callender Field on the West Bank, which had taken over the functions of the Naval Air Station. He was in visual contact with us. And so he kept on getting these directions that he was cleared for landing, and screaming, how the hell do you expect me to land when there are 4,000 cars on the runway? Because they were using the runway as a parking area, and then only did somebody catch on to the fact that he didn't know about the big move.
Despite less than ideal conditions, 115 stalwart seniors graduated at that first commencement. The class of 1962 received their diplomas inside a circus tent, temporarily erected on campus.
So if you made it, if you got a degree from LSUNO, I ain't saying UNO, you got a degree from LSUNO, you're my hero.
Of course, we all had our doubts, right? And I'll never forget, you know, asking the upperclassmen, you know, how was it for their first days? And I had one student who literally told me that his knees were shaking his first day on campus. So it wasn't inspirational as much as frightening in terms of what the prospects might be.
And I was really intimidated by going there for graduate school, because I remembered as a high school kid when LSUNO first opened, one of the nicknames for it was Flunk Out U. You heard all these stories about people who went there and didn't make it past the first semester.
To stay, you only had to earn 5 hours and the equivalent of 10 quality points. So you had to have a C average on 5 hours. And over half of the students, black and whites, flunked out the very first semester.
Well, fortunately, I came from a very good high school, St. Augustine High School, so I was a lot more prepared for college than some of the kids who floated through high school just taking typing and square dancing and not taking enough math and science to prepare them for college level courses.
LSUNO had the reputation of really being very tough, extremely tough, and it was really challenging to students to stay in there. And I found that to be the case. I mean, I did really have to work hard to try to keep grades up.
The fledgling university's rapid growth spurt caught the LSU board off guard. In 7 short years, the infant college had outpaced its parent. New Orleans editorial cartoonist John Chase aptly depicted the knotty problem. Trying to catch a tiger by its tail led to an escalating tug-of-war. WVUE's Alec Gifford anchored a report on one of the hottest issues in town.
As matters stand now, LSU in New Orleans is a branch of LSU in Baton Rouge. But for some time now, a drive for separation has been gathering steam. At first, it was just a shallow plan, but it is now developing into a cause, a crusade.
Back in the 60s, Homer Head and the students had led an effort, I think under Malcolm Earhart, to break away from the LSU system. And it was a bloody fight, and Homer was pilloried by the LSU people, and there were newspaper headlines. But Homer would not give up. He always believed that at least having the name of the university, name of the city that the university was housed in was very important.
LSU students in Baton Rouge had mixed feelings about LSUNO's drive for separation.
The state doesn't have enough money to support the LSU system as it doesn't seem to have now. I don't see how it could possibly have enough to support an independent school down in New Orleans right now.
Privateers on the lakefront campus were more than ready to leave the nest.
I think we're a big enough university to get out on our own. We don't need LSU.
We just need to be an independent university.
We've doubled and tripled in size since we first started. We need the funds.
As long as we remain, connected with LSU Baton Rouge, we're going to be getting the short end of the deal.
There was a feeling among students there that LSUNO was just a stepchild, and they felt that if we could just stand on our own 2 feet, that perhaps more respect would be given.
William Gill, a member of the Louisiana legislature, agreed.
No other school has ever grown as rapidly as LSUNO, and no other school has operated under such circumstances. We need classrooms, we need many other buildings, and students are still going to school in the old naval barracks.
So it really started as a pocketbook issue. And then as we started to investigate it further, we realized the stress on the faculty, the stress on the physical facilities. There were a series of fee increases that seemed to be disproportionate to what we were paying. And as students who were on budgets and who were working, we had a negative reaction to that.
My mom was a widow raising me, and there were finances to consider.
We were overcrowded here. Professors were teaching classes that were far too large.
I can remember there was a rally to encourage more community support, not just LSUNO community support, but Greater New Orleans community support for this idea of changing the name of the school from LSUNO to UNO, University of New Orleans. And at this rally, There were banners with each letter written on each banner that were suspended from the Earl K. Long Library balcony, and at one point the L and the S were to be dropped. And I think I was supposed to drop one of those letters, and I got there too late, and I was really quite disappointed. The movement really gathered up some serious steam when I was there, and the student government president at that time, who really did work hard for it, was Malcolm Earhart.
We had a student rally here one afternoon, a Friday afternoon, and it was a protest rally, and there were thousands of students out there, and I was swept up in the moment, and I said,
"Politics and education do not mix. Yet, as part of the board system, we find ourselves being used continually as a political football in the Louisiana political stadium. Let us spread the word, and we shall become the University of New Orleans now." Thank you.
LSUNO students went to Baton Rouge. They bothered the state legislators. They petitioned the governor. They had the governor on campus and embarrassed him into signing a petition for more funding. Many of them led the fight to change the name, which represented some degree of autonomy for UNO in 1974. So I think students get a lot of credit from sort of the mid-60s to the mid-70s for things that happened.
and you know, I'd like to tell you that we sat down and did great planning and really knew what we were talking about, but we were students, we were young, we were naive.
In February of 1974, LSUNO, the little commuter college, was no more. After more than a decade of struggle, UNO, the University of New Orleans, took its rightful place as a leading metropolitan university. Just as UNO was settling into its new status, political strife infected campuses nationwide. While some UNO students did have strong views, not all protests were student-led.
In the late 1960s, across the country, of course, there was a lot of student unrest, and for reasons I still don't understand, the FBI placed on campus, on UNO's campus, an undercover agent, a mole, fifth column, whatever, agent provocateur, I think is the term. And this guy joined a lot of the radical organizations and tried to get them to do things that were on the edge of violence. He and his wife were both paid by the FBI. The surprise to me was that the FBI went to this trouble for UNO.
They were pretty heated things, and the students were all stirred up. And Steve Ambrose arrived about that time, and of course people don't remember he had his radical days too. He was looking for a city that tolerated eccentrics.
Stephen Ambrose built an international reputation as a biographer and American historian.
He threw himself into his topics like no one I've ever seen. When he researched Crazy Horse and Custer, his book on those two, he dressed like Custer. He let his hair grow and put boots on and buckskin and brought his dog to the office. When he worked in Eisenhower, he clipped his hair, had a military clip, and kind of marched everywhere. Amazing man, and I think the city and the university owe quite a bit to him.
In 1989, LSU named Ambrose a Boyd Professor, the system's highest honor. He captured the imagination of his students with masterful and dynamic lectures.
You know, the thing that I feel best about is having been at UNO all these years. And it's because I've taught at Rutgers, I've taught at Berkeley, I've taught at Madison, I've taught at the Sorbonne, I've taught at the University of Innsbruck, I've taught at Kansas State, other places, always short stints. UNO's always been my home. Nowhere else do I have black colleagues. Nowhere else do I have more than a token number of blacks in the audience. My first black colleague, Raphael Casimir, was one of my very first students at UNO, and I'm very proud of that.
I was the first person to get an MA in the history department in the spring of '68. I was the first black to teach, period. In September 25th, 1967, I was a teaching assistant.
UNO has led the way on the integration of higher education in this country, and UNO led the way on integration in the city of New Orleans, and I've been a part of that.
From those first days, students kept abreast of events through a series of campus publications.
They sort of put that lake shore kind of thing on almost everything else they did for a while. The yearbook was called the Trident, so you have that little sea theme going on. Yeah, I saw some of the earliest publications. They were actually mimeographed, and I mean mimeographed in the most exact sense of the word, on legal size sheets. The last of the four was the Driftwood, and that's the one that stuck. I didn't start at the Driftwood as a writer. My first job there was as the cartoonist. Strangely enough, the first assignment I got was to do an illustration for a column written by Bunny Matthews, who is better known now as an illustrator than as a writer. But I was the editorial cartoonist for the paper for a couple of years. I'm not a particularly good artist, but that was all they had.
Until a new editor arrived on the scene.
He showed up and he said, well, I have a friend who's a cartoonist, and he's going to be the cartoonist from now on, so you're like fired. And I didn't want to lose the clubhouse pass that you had when you were working for the newspaper, because about 70% of the Driftwood staff was women. And that had its appeal to me too. So I said, could I write some articles? And he said, well, sure, like what? And I said, you know, there's a restaurant on the campus here. It was called the Flambeau Room. And he said, well, I've never heard of it. And I said, well, how about that? And he said, that sounds good, write that. So I wrote the story as a review, and it came out, and the editor, in what I frankly thought was the only smart thing he ever did, said, why don't you write a series of articles about other places to eat around the campus? And so I said, sure, and I did, and I've never stopped writing a weekly column since then.
Fitzmaurice also landed his first radio gig on campus at public radio station WWNO.
And I recorded all the time, so I spent like several days saying 7:43, 7:45. Probably heard more of me doing that than anything else.
Other students were drawn to fraternities and sororities that nurtured a thriving social life on campus. One crowning event never lacked for participants. In 1969, Marcia Cavanaugh reigned as the first Miss LSUNO.
The Greeks would always compete for the sweetheart title. And that's what it was. I believe it was the sweetheart of LSUNO. But that year, it was decided that instead the competition would change to a Miss LSUNO. And I was certainly encouraged by my sorority sisters to compete in this.
Today, weather and comfort level dictate the choice of apparel on campus. No such option existed in the early 60s.
When I first started, those strict dress codes were still in force. Women could not wear pants, and guys couldn't wear shorts.
And Ed Burks, who was the Dean of Student Affairs at the time, Ed had to enforce this dress code. And I remember walking across the campus on numerous occasions with Ed when he would suddenly excuse himself and walk quickly or even run to catch some female in a pair of slacks and tell her she had to leave the campus. Well, this was absurd because where was she going? She would have to go home to change clothes.
And I recall, it must have been in that first year when I was there, that there was a protest where guys came in shorts and girls came in pants, and nothing was done, and it was forever changed after that.
A few bold students took it one step further. If showing bare legs was acceptable, why not toss out all inhibitions?
Did you do it? No! How do you feel about it?
I think it's great, whatever you like. It caused a lot of excitement. More people out here for this than anything else in the school's history, probably.
Two participants wholeheartedly agreed.
We just thought we'd be the first ones to do it on this campus. Right. We want to make this campus #1 in North.
The administration elected to turn the other cheek, hoping the trend was a temporary aberration.
When we had the streaking in 1974, I don't remember seeing Ed Burks chasing any of the streakers.
Other student-led activities caused less of a stir, but did provide some relief from the stress of daily studies. a little friendly competition was never far off. Wacky Wednesdays also meant a little music, a little sun, and a whole lot of chilling out. Throughout the decades, students have congregated on campus, finding creative ways to unwind. Initially, intercollegiate sports were not on the agenda. Bucking the LSU system, an unofficial LSUNO football team took to the field at Tad Gormley Stadium in 1965. Chancellor and Mrs. Hitt were among the 3,500 supportive fans. Football was short-lived, yet it was the foundation for future privateer athletics. The Health and PE building opened in 1968 and later earned the dubious nickname the Chamber of Horrors. 1983 saw the realization of another of Homer Hitt's dreams, an arena on the East Campus. This 10,000-seat multi-purpose center hosts athletic events, concerts, and student convocations. On the lower level, a 50-meter competition pool was a marked improvement from the one left over from the Navy base. The East Campus became home base for Privateer Park, with baseball facilities and tennis courts. In 2002, a fitness center on the main campus rounded out the athletic complex. Ron Green served as the first athletic coordinator, and medalist Stan Stopa led the golf team to the school's first national championship. Other stellar athletes soon followed. Capping off a winning season, UNO's Privateers took home the trophy as the 2007 Sun Belt Conference champions. School spirit and school sports, of course, meant a school mascot.
There was an assumption on the part of LSU, this was surprising to me, that we would simply adopt all of their mascots, teams, colors, and everything else. So for the very early years, you could see LSUNO banners, but they would have little tigers on them.
Perhaps it was the proximity to the lake, or a desire to emulate the bold spirit of the legendary pirate Jean Lafitte. For in a student poll, Mike Kettenring's sketch of a swashbuckling hero won out as the official mascot.
Mike was a Student Government Association president, and I remember him telling me that he really wanted UNO to have, or LSUNO to have its own identity. So he just wanted something opposite of purple and gold, so he went for silver and blue, and that's what it is.
Over the years, a larger-than-life alligator joined the Privateers' jolly crew. While some students were wildly enthusiastic about their teams, others engaged in quieter diversions as romance blossomed along the lakefront. They met on campus at the University Center. She attended a meeting of the Political Science Club, which he founded. She was a sophomore. He was a PhD candidate who wrote for an off-campus newspaper.
And the name Errol Laborde sounded very familiar. Way before Gambit, there was Figaro and there was the Vieux-Carré Courier. And this alternative newspaper was a paper that Errol was writing a column for. And I remember the name. So afterwards, I went up to Errol and I said, "Are you the Errol Laborde that writes for the Vieux-Carré Courier?" And so we struck up a conversation, and the rest is history.
And that was the first time I ever experienced somebody recognizing my byline, so I married her.
The university's lakefront location was not without drawbacks. Students in the early decades traversed a barren, lunar landscape, devoid of trees and plant life. The campus often wallowed in a sea of mud.
Oh yeah, when it rained, there were a lot of major puddles, we called them. And you had to go to class, you had to jump over the puddles. But it was a mess when it rained out there because the area hadn't been landscaped.
In the very early days when there was construction, which there was all over campus all the time, people would have to literally build bridges over mud puddles.
They had flat boards, 2x12s, nailed down to cross members. That's how we were able to get from the LA building to the science building, because otherwise it would always look like a marsh out there.
And when LSU first opened, it was in military buildings because that had been a Navy base. And I remember the bookstore was in an old wooden military building. And I guess I was maybe a freshman in high school, and for some reason we were going there one day, and we got caught in the rain. And the drainage wasn't very good. And the rain was so heavy that it actually picked up the car and we actually floated a little bit. Maybe in the tradition of the Navy that had been there before. But for those early graduates, God bless them, because they really had a tough time.
I can remember walking from liberal arts over to science. There was nothing in between, and that could be a really cold, windy walk, and if it was bad weather, you were going to wind up wet, one way or the other. Nothing could protect you. The umbrellas would blow away.
And I also remember a day when it was so foggy that it actually muffled all the sounds, and you could speak and it would you'd felt like it would go 5 feet and die. But that's the strangest weather I ever saw.
No accounts of missing students. That can be verified, but a lot of rumors.
From its humble origins as a recycled naval facility, the campus has undergone a dramatic transformation. In each of its 5 decades of growth, UNO has raised the bar.
Homer had decided early on that in spite of the first master plan, which clustered the buildings kind of in the middle of campus, that we ought to spread out a bit. He was worried that someone would take the land back, and the city had resented the fact that we got all that land, and so I think Homer had it in the back of his mind that if he spread the buildings out, they couldn't take it away from him.
The 2-story Earl K. Long Library was placed smack in the middle. In 1984, 2 additional stories, like layers on a cake, were stacked on top.
I mean, if there's one person in life that you don't associate with libraries and formal book learning, it was Earl Long, but deservedly so, because as the story goes, it was Earl Long who really pushed having that university, and it was his vision to put it out by the lakefront. It really goes to the scoundrel of a politician for creating something that was really just really important to it, and that's really to his lasting credit.
In the next round of building, they put the University Center a little bit off to the east. They put the H&PE building in the extreme southeast corner, the health and physical education. And when the dorms were put up, of course, they put those all the way in the southwest corner. So by the time you look at a map, maybe 10 years after the founding, we've pretty well staked our claim to the whole site.
Gradually, the barracks fell to permanent structures. In 1967, work began on a university center to meet the urgent need for an official gathering place on campus.
One of the nicest compliments I think UNO ever got was during the papal visit when the Pope came to the campus. The Commissioner of Administration of the state of Louisiana was standing on our balcony University Center. He's looking out over the campus and he says, "The place is beautiful." He said, "It's so well manicured it looks like a golf course." I said, "Well, you know, we have our ways of doing things." And he said, "Yeah," he said, "there's the state of Louisiana and there's UNO." And I said, "Thank you, that was a wonderful compliment." He said, "I didn't necessarily mean it as a compliment." I said, "Trust me, we take it as a great compliment."
On the west side of campus, the Cove opened in 1972, offering both outdoor and indoor eating spaces, as well as a popular hangout called the Sandbar. Some students ventured off campus for a bite to eat.
One of the legendary places was, of course, Luigi's, with the red and white checkered tablecloths.
Luigi's was a really terrible pizza parlor right near UNO, and everybody went there because where else could you go? And that's about all I could say about it. I never thought it was any good.
There was another place here, there was another place right off of Legion Fields called the Library, which was a bar, and it was known for its burgers. And of course, the joke about it was that you could always tell your parents that you're going to the library. And so that became a really popular hangout.
In 1972, the theater department closed the curtain on the old lab workshop and stepped onto the stage of the new Performing Arts Center. The center also houses the Jazz Studies program, led by internationally acclaimed musician Ellis Marsalis. In 1987, a 9-story glass tower made a distinct impact. The establishment of a new marine engineering program dictated the design footprint.
It was determined that naval architecture had to have its own building with a towing tank, which is a facility to test models. And the only way we could do that was to build a whole new building. So we went from not being on the priority list of the university for a new building to being first.
Looking back to his student days, Dean Trahan recalls one advantage to the old, closer to the Lake Barracks location.
We had a telescope in that room looking out a window on the second floor, and we used to watch girls on the lakefront through this telescope. I have to admit that sometimes.
The new millennium saw the opening of Kirschman Hall, a state-of-the-art business administration facility, and Pontchartrain halls, north and south, added much-needed dorm space. One revamped structure combined vestiges of the old with the new. The Homer Hitt Alumni and Visitor Center was built around the brick smokestack, formerly the Navy base incinerator. With space for alumni offices and events, the center pays tribute to UNO's first chancellor, Homer Hitt.
We've got, a great campus, and we've got great regional campuses. We have one of the best programs of international studies offered abroad by any American university in Asia and in Europe now. So there are centers of excellence here that have, on the academic side, on the outreach side, on the graduate school and research area of sciences, I think give us a tremendous opportunity for the future development of the city as well as the university.
As UNO expanded into the community, another local institution bordering the lakefront ceased operations.
When the Batt family closed down the operations, it lay fallow for about 10 years. Then a developer came in with the idea of putting condos there. That project was unsuccessful. And I think our chancellor at the time, Greg O'Brien, really saw, we were the appropriate land developers really for that project.
The surrounding neighborhoods judged UNO's proposed technology park as the lesser of two evils.
And at that time, the levee board was a bit of a rogue levee board. And it was the time when gaming casinos were coming in, and there were casinos proposed everywhere. And I believe that the neighborhood also thought that it could be the site of a riverboat, or it could be a casino hotel, that there were lots of developments that could take place. We looked great by comparison.
As the levee board signed on the dotted line, they floundered over a definition for this new entity. The lease is a laundry list of negatives.
It really says what a research park isn't. And it isn't a gambling institution. It isn't a massage parlor. It isn't slot machines. And it said all the things that it isn't. And so we're defined by what we aren't rather than what we are.
With outstanding UNO engineering and computer science programs and a talented pool of graduates to draw from, the Navy signed on as the anchor tenant. After nearly 50 years, it had come full circle, returning to the place it had abandoned in the 1950s. In a small clearing adjacent to the tech park, a lone lighthouse maintains a curious vigil. In 1859, the Port Pontchartrain, or Muhlenberg Lighthouse, guided lake-bound vessels to safety. During the final 50 years of operation, the last 3 keepers were women. In 1929, a massive land reclamation project rendered the beacon obsolete. Once 2,100 feet from shore, the desolate lighthouse now sits on the dry land, UNO land. On August 29, 2005, when Hurricane Katrina came barreling inland, did the spirits of lighthouse keepers Ellen, Madge, and Minnie still linger within? Or, in the devastating aftermath, did these vigilant souls, like UNO faculty, staff, and students, seek shelter elsewhere? Safe haven for Chancellor Tim Ryan and a contingent of administrators was a war room at LSU. Their first priority was to retrieve faculty paychecks.
And then the second reason was that we had to get computer backup tapes or computer disks, because all of our records, our financial records, our student records, everything that we had was on computers.
Aerial photographs brought good news. The campus rose above the surrounding water. The newest building on campus inadvertently acted as a beacon for stranded evacuees. The specs for the not yet officially opened Kirschman Hall called for an emergency backup system to trigger the lights.
And it was about the only lights in New Orleans. And so when the helicopters flew over, they saw an island that had lights. So they just deposited people. We end up, according to the Coast Guard, about 2,500 people evacuated to the campus. We had heard through fairly reliable reports that some of these people had weapons. There was gunshots fired.
In spite of serious safety issues, Chancellor Ryan and Vice Chancellor Joel Chatelain were intent on returning to campus to recover records and evaluate the damage. Speeding down the abandoned interstate, their sole escort was an elderly wildlife and fisheries agent. At the National Guard Center in Laplace, they sought reinforcements.
And this must have been a 19-year-old kid gets in the car with us, and the older fellow and the kid and Joel and I, and we start to take off. I said, wait a minute, where's the National Guard? He said, well, this is it. And I said, excuse me, do you have a weapon? He goes, no, sir. I'm going, what? I'm sorry, but what good are you? But we had to get to campus, so we said, all right, let's go. So we take off down I-10 over the spillway with an unarmed 19-year-old, a nice elderly gentleman who did have a gun, but more importantly, a blue light on the wildlife and fishery police vehicle, so we could get past the barricade.
Following a circuitous and often harrowing route, the group arrived at the Lakefront Coast Guard Station.
So I had to pull out my ID. Well, and I think we're phasing these out, but somebody had the bright idea for our ID to put our mascot, which is this goofy-looking alligator, imposed on the ID card. I'm going into a high-ranking commander of the New Orleans Coast Guard and trying to prove that I need to get on campus in this emergency, and this is what I have to use to convince him it looks like something you get out of a Cracker Jacks box. But whatever it was, it worked.
The only access to campus was by boat. The issue for the Coast Guard was whether a former pleasure boat pier in front of the tech park survived Katrina's wrath.
He goes, all right, but you're not sure it's still there? I said, no, I haven't seen any. He said, all right, we might have to do an insertion, because I said there was a sand beach, and so I said, okay, well, all right, I guess that's okay. So then he turns around his men, you ever done an insertion? And I'm trying not to laugh. I mean, the whole situation was somewhat surreal.
Concerned over potential hostiles on campus, the Coast Guard prepared for a D-Day style invasion of what had been Pontchartrain Beach.
They gave us flak jackets. We had to wear, Joel and I had to wear flak jackets. We had to put a helmet on, a military helmet. And each of us had a 6-person escort that included, I think, 4 of the 6 had automatic weapons.
Fortunately, as the campus loomed ahead, the old pier remained substantially intact.
The boat went to the research park. The dock was fine, so we didn't have to do an insertion. We tied up and then walked across the research park, across Lakeshore Drive. I had a little piece of paper that Jim Burgard, our director of UCC, had drawn a map of what I had to do, and it was really like a treasure hunt. You know, I had to go get into his office and get a key to this other office, and he keeps it in a certain place in his office. Then I had to go get that key that would let me into the door of the computer room. Then there was a cabinet that I had to go into and find the key. I mean, it was just like there was literally 6 or 8 steps. So we were able to get what we needed, and as we ultimately, I think that really made the major difference in whether we were able to reopen the university for the fall semester.
Back in the Baton Rouge War Room, it was decision time.
Every other university, Tulane, Loyola, Dillard, Xavier, SUNO, Delgado, everyone canceled their fall semester. I guess the easy thing to do would have been to close and to say we just can't do it. Overwhelming message we were getting from our students was don't close UNO. And I think there were many who were concerned that they weren't going to be able to finish school if we did. So we made the decision to reopen without really knowing if it was possible.
With extensive wind, water, and roof damage, along with vandalism, a satellite campus became the only option.
I visited the Jeff Center after the storm. It was terribly damaged. We managed to get it fixed in 6 weeks. I still don't know how.
The hastily cobbled together rehab team of faculty, staff, and students pitched in to be ready for the October 10th, 2005 opening day of classes.
The night before, 10 or 11 o'clock at night, I sat around watching staff on the floor with electric drills assembling chairs so that students would have a place to sit.
We registered almost 7,000 students. We had a big ceremony on the morning of the 10th in the parking lot of the Jeff Center, because we really felt that this was a sign to the whole community that if the largest university in the city could come back after basically 6 weeks of hiatus after the worst natural disaster in the history of the United States, that there was hope for the city.
On December 5th, 2005, a tattered UNO campus played host to a media frenzy. In a scene reminiscent of that first graduation in 1962, a big tent was erected in front of the Earl K. Long Library. Former Presidents George Bush and Bill Clinton arrived to make a Katrina Fund contribution to higher education. As Chancellor Ryan announced that this was the first event
we've had on campus since Katrina,
the audience erupted.
Everybody stood up, cheered for several minutes, clapped. You could tell. Bill Clinton leaned over to me and he said, "Boy, you sure do have a spirited bunch." But it was just, everybody was so happy to be back on campus, and it was students and alumni and university supporters and so forth. So that was a great day, and in that we received $1.5 million, which helped also.
But repairs could not be made in time for UNO's first post-Katrina graduation.
The arena ended up with, I think, $25 million worth of damage. About a third of the roof had been peeled back, so we didn't have a venue on campus, and so the Hilton was chosen.
We graduated some, I think, 796 students who would not have been able to graduate had we not reopened for that fall semester. I've never seen a group of kids and their family and faculty that were so excited.
The first graduation after Katrina was highly emotional. The university decided that special recognition was needed. They actually passed out to everybody sort of a silver cord you could hang around your academic robe.
All of you have received, I hope you've all received, the special cord tonight for commencement. I know what I'm going to do with it. Every time I put this cap and gown on for a commencement exercise, I will wear this cord. I'm not sure what you're going to do with it, but this is a special recognition, the Katrina Survivor Cord. We're making progress. What we're now in, I hope, is we're out of the Katrina rebuilding process. I think we all want that page in the history book to be behind us. We'll still be in a building process, but I think we wanted to be building toward, instead of rebuilding what we had, building toward the vision of a great research university here in New Orleans on the lakefront.
So I think the last 50 years have paved the way for the next 50.
And I think in terms of the black public officials, black judges, white judges, legislators, and so forth, even if they themselves are not UNO grads, they may have a spouse, or they may have children, or they have somebody. So the presence that the university has in this community, of course, is tremendous.
I completely agree with what Homer Hitt used to say, which was that UNO, by putting all of these people into the local community, and most of us did stay, and moving us up from what we would have been, had a greater contribution to the community than any other educational institution in the city. And I think a case could be made for that.
In 1984, UNO's first chancellor and fiercest advocate sent an enduring message to those assembled in the audience.
Let us, graduates, faculty, administrators, and citizens of this community, pledge this morning that we shall keep this spirit alive. Let us be aware even now that we have just begun the building of a great university. Continue the UNO tradition of the pioneering spirit. Do this, and the diploma you receive here this morning will remain among your most treasured possessions. Thank you very much.
If the success of a university is measured by tenacity and spirit, then UNO, the University of New Orleans, is on a stellar course for its voyage into the next half-century.
Nobody that I can remember ever complained that, oh, this place is a dump. No, we just said, hey, where you have calculus? Well, I'm going to meet at the student union, and that was just like a pup tent outside the place.
Oh my goodness, on those cold, rainy days, very windy days, with the breeze coming off of the lake, many an umbrella unfortunately went by the wayside. It was a little rough, but it's what it was.
I remember streaking, yeah. I drew some cartoons that we ran in the paper about it. It lasted, the trend did, I think, about 18 minutes. And it was of people ripping their clothes off and running buck naked across open spaces.
In an era when you had college protests all across the country, what we had at UNO, that the ringleader turned out to be working for the FBI, okay? And so even the guy who was in charge of the protests was an undercover agent. So that's how radical the campus had become at the time.
UNO Memories is made possible by Gary and Martha Solomon, 1979 graduates, and by the University of New Orleans Foundation, fostering academic excellence in a community that deserves it.